The symbol also represents this idea of a horizontal and a vertical plane. The horizontal plane being the earthly plane, and the vertical plane being the heavenly. And these two meet. There's a meeting place between them. And that meeting place is man, is the human being. Now, if you look at Islam, that very same symbolism exists in the Shahada itself. Because the Shahada, which is the testimony that the Muslims must articulate in order to be considered Muslims, although there is an opinion in the Hanafi madhab, which is a school of legal tradition in Islam, that actually says that it's not necessary to articulate it. Any outward indication of an acceptance of Islam should be considered a testimony, in essence. So anybody that prayed with the Muslims would be considered a Muslim. In fact, even if they simply said, peace be upon the Prophet Muhammad, that would also be considered enough. And Ibn Rifa'ah from the Shafi'i school, which is another legal school, actually said that the majority of people should be considered not legal Muslims, but Muslims in substance, because he said unless there's some indication that they have rejected Islam, the assumption should be that they are Muslim, because Islam is the primordial faith. And I think that's a very interesting, because that's a very early Shafi'i position, and that is in the text, which I think adds a nuance to this idea of dividing the world into kuffar and into Muslims, which has been the traditional approach of many, many Muslims, dividing the world simply into believers and unbelievers, which is never that simple. So if you look at the Shahada itself, it represents this meeting place between the heaven and the earth. La ilaha illallah, there is nothing worthy of worship except God, and Muhammad is his messenger. In other words, a message is coming from heaven to earth, and the Prophet Muhammad symbolizes that meeting place in the same way that Christ symbolizes that meeting place in Christianity, and Moses symbolizes that meeting place in Judaism. Now, what is significant about that is that this understanding of the human being is the most dominant, widespread understanding throughout the planet. Human beings have always believed that the human being itself was an interspace between something that was immaterial and between the material. What we call the soul and what we call the body. What we call matter and what we call spirit. Now, one of the hallmarks of modern society is this removal of that aspect of the human being. And this is it's been a very difficult going. But if you look at the way the human being is being degraded in modern society, all over the world, but in modern society, which unfortunately is most pronounced in Western civilization, if you look at the way the human being is presented, the human being is being presented as the sum total of his desires, or her desires. And advertising, which influences us in ways that we're not even aware of, is constantly pulling on these strings within the human soul, inclining them towards their appetites. So we see advertisements now. If you go, I went recently into a store in California, and there were pictures of women with clothes on, and all it said was want. Just the word want. And then other ones said need. I mean, this was just the message. There was no other message. Want. Need. There's a whole advertising campaign in America for a certain soda pop that just says, obey your thirst. Now, historically, when people obeyed their thirst, they drank water, which is actually quite good for you. But now the message is obey your thirst by spending money on sugar and water, which is going to rot your teeth and cause other problems as well. I never mentioned the phosphoric acid that's in soda pop. So this in essence, is what the modern world is telling people. It's telling people to succumb to your desires. If you go into Las Vegas in America, which represents the most decadent aspects of American society, there is literally a huge sign and if you ask me, what was I doing in Las Vegas? I was actually visiting a mosque there. So there are Muslims in Las Vegas. I wasn't gambling. And I'm proud to say that I don't gamble. I don't beat my wife either. So I'm trying to be good. There was a sign over the airport that said, "Submit to your desires." Now that, in essence, is the opposite of the message of Islam. What the message of Islam is saying is submit to your Lord, who created your desires.